Imagine being stranded in a place where survival is mathematically impossible. No rescue is coming. Your only way out is a path so dangerous it looks exactly like certain death. Sindbad the sailor is often remembered as a swashbuckling adventurer, but in his original tales, he was actually a calculating merchant. He operated on the spreadsheets of his era, relying on established trade winds, safe harbors, and highly predictable variables. On his sixth voyage, those variables failed completely. A violent, unseasonal storm hijacked his vessel, driving it miles off course before shattering its hull against a jagged coastline. The immediate chaos of a shipwreck is terrifying, but the acute danger ends when the splintered wood hits the sand. The true crisis begins when the storm clears and you realize exactly where the tide has deposited you. Sindbad and his surviving crew had washed up on a massive, sheer cliff face. The beach was entirely choked with the rotting timber of 1,000 previous wrecks and the bleached bones of the sailors who had sailed them. With no food, no fresh water, and mountains too steep to climb, the crew sat on the beach and waited for a rescue that would never come. Over a few agonizing weeks, starvation and exhaustion took them one by one. Eventually, Sindbad buried the last of his companions. He was entirely alone, trapped in a suffocating silence, with nothing but time to calculate his own fast-approaching end. Surviving the initial impact of a crisis buys you nothing if you simply freeze in the wreckage. That dead end remains a dead end if you sit still and accept the parameters of the disaster. Sindbad analyzed the beach. If he stayed on the sand, his chance of survival was exactly 0%. The facts were literally written in the bones around him. But at the far end of the island, he noticed a strange geological anomaly. A massive river of fresh water didn't flow out into the ocean. It flowed inland, rushing violently downward into a pitch-black cavern beneath the mountain. This diagram models the exact choice he faced. The flat line represents staying on the beach, certain death, a 0% probability of survival. The spiking, chaotic trend line represents the subterranean river. It's an unknown variable. It might be a 99% chance of death, but logically, a 1% chance in the unknown mathematically beats a 0% chance. Ancient storytellers called this active descent into darkness katabasis. Sindbad stopped waiting to die. He gathered up the shattered timbers of the ruined ships, lashed together a small, sturdy raft, and deliberately shoved off into the roaring current of the Black Cave. When you have no safe options left, leaning directly into terrifying risk is the only way to reclaim your agency. You force the situation to evolve, even if you can't see the destination. Inside the mountain, the current accelerated. The ceiling dropped lower and lower, scraping his head, until the last sliver of daylight vanished completely behind him. Then, a faint glow pierced the absolute black. As his eyes adjusted, he saw that the jagged cave walls and the riverbed below were completely thick with glowing rubies, emeralds, and diamonds. He was floating through a geological vault, holding more wealth than any empire on Earth. Yet that wealth was fused directly into the sharp stalactites and the crushing blind rapids that threatened to flip his raft at any second. Sindbad clawed at the walls, desperately loading armfuls of priceless gems onto his tiny raft, all while aggressively steering away from the rocks trying to tear his vessel apart. Colossal, life-altering rewards do not sit in the center of safe harbors. They are locked away in volatile environments where the risk of catastrophic failure is at its absolute highest. For days, he navigated the terrifying subterranean rapids in total darkness, surviving entirely on instinct, until a tiny prick of white light appeared in the distance. The current surged, launching his battered raft out of the mountain's throat and into the calm, sunlit waters of a lush, populated valley. Local farmers pulled his half-starved body from the water. When he finally recounted his origins, they were stunned. No one had ever returned from the graveyard ships. He charted a new course back to his home port. By enduring the crushing pressure of the underground river, he secured his life and a fortune that made him one of the wealthiest merchants of his era. His physical salvation and massive fortune existed precisely because he refused to accept the passive death sentence handed to him on the beach. In business and in life, we often find ourselves washed up on our own ruined beaches. Market crashes, career plateaus, and sudden failures can look like absolute dead ends. But when the visible roads disappear, the map hasn't ended. There is almost always a hidden, deeply uncomfortable alternative path that forces you out of your safe zone. Look at the failure in front of you. Stop staring at the wreckage and start scanning the perimeter for the dark cave, your own personal river of gems that you've been too afraid to enter. Real breakthroughs require you to abandon the safety of the known. You have to turn your back on the familiar graveyard, build a raft, and sail deliberately into the dark.